Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to introduce you to, is it Dr.
Yes.
Hopperton or? Yep,
Yes.
Dr. Larry Hopperton, who is the current director of distributed learning and learning technology at Tyndale University in Canada. And today's topic, which is I think one that a lot of people are really are actually really wanting to hear more about, is the accessibility and how it is being overlooked in this particular time. So I introduce everybody to Larry Hopperton, and we'll go ahead and get going.
Well, hello, and thank you for coming along. We're on one of those topics that's very near and dear to me. In Canada, we are required to be fully, shall I call it, ADA compliant by January 1st of next year. So I'm looking at what's going on and thinking, well, that's interesting. How are we going to get there? Especially since it's, how are we going to get there in about 2 weeks in time for the summer semester?
Right.
It's truly a crazy time for all of us. And I look at the field that we're in and the years of it. I got into this back in the very early 80s. I put forward a first computer-aided instruction program on linear algebra for the university level. I was in the publishing business at the time. Been in it ever since, and so watched a lot of developments. Never really expected to see this one happen quite so fast. We have meticulously and theoretically created this online learning experience over the years, and all of a sudden, the infrastructure that we've created has been hijacked, as it must be, but the question of quality is also being put on the table, since suddenly we have large numbers of inexperienced teachers who are suddenly thrown into this at the last possible moment with minimal training, and they're going to come out saying, yes, I've taught online before. We have some problems. You've lived through this as well as I have. The timing on the closing of institutions on both sides of the borders was almost identical. All of a sudden, at Tyndale at least, at 4:59 on the Friday night, the chief finance officer sent out a memo saying, we're shutting the campus. So that was Friday night at 5 o'clock. We had all courses up and running again on Wednesday of the following week. Every school faced this, a sudden mad scramble. It's not like we had a reading week to play with anymore. We're at the end of the semester. And what we do now is going to lead to student success or to student frustration and potentially failure. It's down to us, and our core business is those students. So we've gone into a scramble to get everything online. And in doing this, people like us who've been in the field for so long, we have processes that we're accustomed to using, but we're accustomed to using them over time. And there was no time. Suddenly, there was no roadmap available that we could put in front of inexperienced faculty. There was no roadmap we could put in front of ourselves to say, this is how to move this initiative forward. Suddenly, we were trying to shoehorn the experience of on-ground teaching and learning into an online environment that we know is not perfect for a one-to-one mapping of on-ground learning. The experienced and meticulous design that we've built into our online courses, the learning theory, the teaching methodologies for online, all of a sudden, for Tyndale, in the space of, well, let's see, Monday and Tuesday, we're left behind. And now we are simply trying to accommodate. We are trying to implement a business solution to a crisis rather than excellence in teaching and learning. And, you know, quite frankly, I think we've all done the right thing in doing that, because in that little window we had of 2 days, how much excellence can you do? I don't know about, you know, all the schools, but on the Monday morning after the close down, we had Monday and Tuesday, we held a synchronous training session for faculty. And Tyndale's a relatively small school. We packed the faculty into 2 classrooms, both of which were fully equipped for synchronous learning. And we had about another 40 people, including myself, come in using Zoom. I'll be honest, when I looked at that group, I was very worried, because what I was looking at is, and I've been at Tyndale for 15 years, and these are the faculty members who refused to get on board online learning in any way. In any way. Can I get you to post your syllabus onto your course page? Oh, no, 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 no. I hand out my syllabus on paper. That's what we're talking about. And all of a sudden, they were all sitting in front of us and told, you are doing this on Wednesday. On Wednesday, you are doing this. And so it was the most hair-raising training event I've ever seen. Fortunately, the fellow who's replacing me delivered it. He's a much better actor than I am. I would have been more worried. I was left with the issues of, we didn't even try and teach him how to do quizzes or anything else. It was just like, give it to me. I'll take care of that for you. And since then, I'm pushing back at the faculty saying, why do you need a 100-question multiple choice test? Why? What is it you're asking in 100 questions you couldn't ask in 50? And don't you realize how much easier 50 is to do than 100? We're working on it. It's coming. Anyway, if you think about the process that's led us here, over the last 15 years, what have our institutions done with online learning? Well, we've created an infrastructure for this at our schools and at our governing institutions. As you know, ATS is going to ask you about your online learning in the accreditation approvals. We've established the infrastructure and the credibility. Internet bandwidth has gone up significantly. Browser capability has increased significantly. Everything has been step by incremental step, leading us to the success that we now have. And, you know, my note here says, SCORM and the cognitive revolution. I remember being involved in this in SCORM in the earliest days, and it was a beautiful thing. The idea of interoperability of content, it's enticing and intoxicating, really. So I was very much involved with it until SCORM was finally released. And then, like the rest of the cognitive society, I kind of looked at it and said, you've created a computer science solution to a learning problem. And your starting point is wrong. This is not a computer science issue. This is a learning issue. This, incidentally, is where the learning management system Moodle came from, was the revolt against SCORM. And the argument that a learning management system should be built from a cognitive standpoint rather than a technical standpoint. We've come through that. We've created enterprise solutions so that a student can register online and automatically be tied into their course, and everything they do in the course be automatically tied back to registration. These exist, but they've all existed in, with the exception of Liberty, in fairly small pockets. And what I mean by that is, so Tyndale offers, 25 online courses per semester out of 150. We're a small group, but that infrastructure is there for that small group. And it's meant that when that infrastructure is going to be pressed, well, the only question is how quickly can we scale it? And I'll tell you, it can be scaled quickly. The other thing we've been watching over the 15 years is a separation of faculty, the online faculty versus the on-ground faculty. Those individuals who would say to me, no, I won't have anything to do. I'm too old to get involved with computers. I always love that one because I ask them how old they are, and I'm usually older. But there's been a very different approach. People like us have focused on those individuals who've come to the online, and to a much lesser extent on the on-ground people. After all, I always said they're either dinosaurs or I'm going to let the magic of retirement take over, and we'll put it online after they've left. The other kinds of things that we've seen in terms of our infrastructure is an introduction and growth of supports for the achievement of learning. Sorry, where am I? In learning and in administration. So, for example, at Tyndale, every student has a Tyndale email address. And that becomes absolutely critical, especially when we start talking about disability accommodations. That student email address is assigned by the central computers. Ours is Genzabar. Our learning management system is Moodle. These are integrated, and so Genzabar knows to put that student into the course in Moodle. Well, when the issue of disability came up, as it really has, one issue we started looking at is, can I create structures within courses that are only available to the student with disabilities? Let me give you an example. We did systematic theology. And in doing systematic theology, typically a week would have 4 to 7 videos. And I was then isolating the videos as MP3s so that, well, a number of reasons. For years, I heard students asking me, is there any way I can download the audio so I can play it in my car? And the second thing is an MP3 being interpreted by an assistive device is much easier to deal with than a full-blown video. It's easier for that student. The problem was that the professor objected and said, I don't want everyone to have access to those audios. I want them to sit there and pay attention to the videos. And all well and good, but against the law. And the solution became obvious, and I'm back to my student profile in their email. We can signal Moodle to adjust the course roster for that disabled student. So suddenly the audios are available, but they're not available to everybody else. And similarly, when we get into things like assessments, if we're getting into tests and now we have to accommodate time, well, what I'd like to do is set one test and have the student profile cause the accommodation. And we can do that. So I've got a test running this week. It's a 1-hour test. I've got an 1.5 hour accommodation and a 2-hour accommodation. And that's all being fed through the student profiles. I'm getting off on this because it's actually a cool idea, which has come grinding to a halt because of a certain virus. Another core thing that's happened over the past 15 years is the creation and the dissemination of the WCAG guidelines as they relate to online learning, as they relate to web-based everything, but in particular to what we're doing, to online learning. WCAG 2.0 was a product of the W3C consortium headed by Tim Berners-Lee. They're down in New Zealand, and their function is to look at ethical uses of technology as a whole. So they looked at the issue of disability and came out with their recommendations. Those recommendations have been adopted internationally. And I can tell you, if you pick up the American Disability Act and read the clauses related to web-based delivery, you are reading WCAG 2.0 verbatim. In Canada, the same thing is true. Exactly the same text applies. So we're all dealing with the same laws. Another point is we have, in Christian education, made explorations into the requirements of the Disability Acts and what it means to online learning. But we have not had the reality of an enforcement date in front of us. And I understand that's still the case down in the US. For me here, I have an enforcement date. And so I'm working towards it. All these wonderful things have been going on. This has been the life that we've experienced over 10 years, and it's been a grand run. It really has. I brag that at Tyndale, we have never had a semester smaller than the one before for the past 15 years. And it's true. I mean, what a run. But now that is completely under threat. Enter the virus. All of a sudden, all on ground is shut down. All of a sudden, all of it is being transitioned to online learning, whether the faculty and students like it or not. Your choice is sacrifice your semester. The help groups, such as my distributed learning group and the IT group, will dive in, provide simplified, basic, one-level training to bring everybody up to a single point by Wednesday. And then we'll worry about what to do with it for the summer after that. And then comes the support ends. This is where I lost my holiday. Everybody who had any level of expertise whatsoever with computing, with technology, with learning, everybody's mobilized for the hands-on support. I should tell you, we launched on Wednesday. By Friday, there was no one allowed on the campus, but we had 2 days of, well, we counted up the miles from running up and down the halls, helping faculty out. Because, I mean, it's the first time you've been on a learning management system. You don't know what to do. So I think that as an institution, we did a wonderful job of keeping it going. As I look at what's going on across this continent with institutions that have shut down, there is a superhuman effort to keep everything going. But the question now comes up, what about the students being left behind? I know that we've posted MP3 audios up without having any captioning, without having a transcript. Well, we just haven't had time. But that's one of those requirements. Our students' needs and are their rights, as I think has been established through ADA litigation, being overlooked or even worse, ignored during this crisis. At what point are we going to turn our attention back to the idea of accommodating, no, accommodating is the wrong word, providing for their needs as learners? And this is an area that in the past, we've heard about the litigation for non-compliance. It was happening to the public institutions. I believe Harvard and MIT were both sued at one point for not having compliance built into their online courses. There are, University of California was at one point. There's a number of these cases out there. How long before those cases apply again, but apply to all of us? There is under the law a provision for undue burden specified within the American Disability Act. And I put it to you that right now, that's where we are. We are in the undue burden state. We're scrambling to keep our institutions alive, to keep servicing our students' needs. Once we get to a point of stabilization, and I'd suggest to you that that's going to come this summer, that undue burden stage is likely going to be coming to an end, at which point, where is the plan for compliance? And my concern is that there isn't one in place. We know right now that there is a very good likelihood that the enforced social isolation is going to continue through the summer semester. Our summer semester starts in 3 weeks. They're talking about not allowing baseball in Canada until July. Now, this is serious. Our short term then is the summer semester. What are we going to do to be ready then? And secondly, what about a longer term picture? What if this continues, as is quite possible, a year, 18 months. Now our fall semester is in jeopardy. So the solution that an institution is going to look at is let's move it all online. But as soon as you do that, the compliance issue is going to be front and center, especially for me, because I got to be there by January. I've already suggested at Tyndale that we have a solution for the summer semester. And it's not to just throw everything online. It's to take advantage of the fact that we have 35 high-end online courses at the seminary. We're offering 11 of them at the moment. Let's offer 25. Let's put a minimum enrollment on them, but all of those on-ground students who are looking to continue their education, where are they going to go this summer unless we have courses available to them? And in the same breath, there are a number of smaller seminaries in Ontario, all of them ATS. And I'm suggesting to them, they do the same thing. They give us their students for the summer to continue their programs, recognize the credit, and it means that the seminary system in Southern Ontario is reaching out to the needs of students. Sounds to me like everybody wins. Don't think it'll happen. For the fall, what we're going to be looking at is that the fully online courses are robust. They have been thoroughly tested and validated, and the disability considerations are already built in. There's a little bit of fine tuning on those to go before December, before January. Ultimately, we need to bring every course that's offered to that same standard, and that's a huge leap. And so how do we do it? How do we make this leap, especially with a faculty whose attitude is, I don't want anything to do with online? Well, you're in it. Now is the reality. Now we have to do it. And you know as well as I do, having dealt with faculty, that one of the first things you're going to encounter here is resistance. If I start telling you, you have to do something, well, the first question I always hear is, can't I get someone in IT to do that? It's like, sure, we have unlimited gnomes in IT that just do nothing but fiddle with Word documents. Time is short, and accessibility has to become a state of mind. It has to become a state of mind now, in this crisis time, and it has to carry forward as we attempt to incorporate more and more of these on-ground courses online. I'm really looking at this as potentially a renaissance for the disabled in learning. This is the chance where we can address the issue across the total education population. It's no longer restricted to only online, it's all of us now. And if we can all adapt the accessibility as a state of mind approach, we can do this. Now, for the last, where am I? For the last year or so, I've been worrying about this issue. In the process of retiring, I've been trying to drive it forward that accessibility is not limited to online learning. Accessibility is applied to all learning that's touching computers. Well, it's all learning, period, but in particular to all learning that's using a computer in one way or another. And it means that we have to bring faculty up to speed on the law and on what they need to do in order to achieve compliance by 2021. To that extent, I'm in the process of working through a PowerPoint right now on exactly this. What does faculty need to know? And it has to be simple. If I start talking to them about details of HTML coding, they're gone. If I can tell them to use a particular font, I've got a better chance. And I'm going to give you a couple of my key points here. Where do we need to be when the grace period expires? What do you, as a faculty member teaching this summer, have to worry about with the first document you're going to put on the learning management system? I've been telling them at Tyndale, I want 5 points. I want to get it down to 5 points. Now it's much longer. The PowerPoint presentation is about an hour. Here are my 5 points. What do we have to do in order to make aggressive moves on compliance between now and the summer semester? First of all, use the defaults. In our learning management systems, you can set levels of heads. Use those rather than setting levels of heads in your document. And there's a reason. Our learning management systems are programmed to meet compliance requirements. Those heads in Moodle or in Canvas or in Blackboard have a code built into them that signals out to the assistive devices what this thing is. It's a level 1 head, it's a level 2 head. Take advantage of it. Secondly, with colors, well, while I'm on learning management systems, colors comes down a bit. The colors that are going to be programmed into your learning management system will be compliant. We know about color blindness and those issues. I always tell everyone, don't use red and don't use green. Well, you can if your contrasts are sufficient. And if you use the colors defaulting in the learning management system, they will. Next one, Word. Did you know that you can do 9 levels of head in Word using defaults? It's really simple. So as a faculty member, rather than going in and doing up all your own levels of heads, use the defaults in Word because they carry that same code for the assistive devices. So far, if we just do what the systems let us do, rather than become completely creative, we are compliant. If you decide you want to change the font, well, now I have to give you my fonts talk, because some are okay and some aren't. What we did at Tyndale was set all institutional machines to a default font that is compliant. Use the defaults. Color is always an issue. And as I said, I warn people against red and green. Let me give you an example of where this came up. I was showing an external company to the dean of the university. He had discovered it at a conference. It did online learning, and he asked me to take a look at it. So I did, and I was presenting it to him, and I had it up on his machine. I had him sitting in front of it, and I was telling him what to do. And I said, now you see here where it says, click the green button. He said, yeah, I see that. I said, well, just click the green button. He said, I don't see that. I'm colorblind. Well, he's the dean. Okay, deans can be colorblind. But if we know that that's the case, if we know that certain things are sensitive, let's simply avoid them. And if we're going to use them anyway, then let's add a next step, tagged images or tagged descriptors. We know that a blind person, if there's an image up on the screen, they're not going to see it. And so what the law is saying is we need to tag the image. Very simple process. You can do it through Word. You can do it through your learning management system. You can do it through HTML. It's very simple. But it simply says, blind person, put your cursor on top of this picture, and text will come up accessible to your device that tells you what the picture is. If you're using images, provide them with text. And even better, provide them with an extended description. If I show you a map of Paul's journey across Crete, and you're blind, well, that's kind of hard to get the message across unless I've written that brief paragraph that describes it. So if you're using images to deliver content, make sure there's an alternate method to get that information out to the descriptive advice. That's 4 points. My last one says captions and MP3s. If video is being used, it must be captioned. Okay, that's an absolute, no question about it, by January. Difficulty that we run into is captioning software tends to be a little dubious. I use YouTube. YouTube has not learned what capitals and periods are. So it's coming out without any punctuation. And you should see how it will render Hezekiah. I have a faculty member named Gord Osteen, and the very first video that we posted of him, captioning said, "Hello, welcome to Old Testament History and Theology. I am your professor, Dr. Gord O. Say Yes." Captions are not reliable. Ultimately, best practices is caption correction. I hire a few students every summer under government works programs, and their job is to go through all the videos and correct the punctuation. It does make a big difference. Be careful with your captions. And then the other little piece, I mentioned it earlier, MP3s. MP3s are much easier for an assistive device to interpret than a full-blown video. I was playing last night, I was having a beer, sitting right exactly where I am, thinking about this, and I said, think of it this way, your pipe is this big, and you're gonna take this and try and ram it through. That's your video. How long is it gonna take? Oh, it's stuck. This is your audio. It goes straight through. And we need to be that cognizant of that. If we're going to provide the video to a disabled student, let's provide it in a format that they can use easily. So in conclusion, I think that we're in the middle of a revolution in online learning. We're in the middle of something I never thought I would actually see. If I did, I wouldn't be retiring in May. I'm reminded of a day very shortly after I got a PhD. I was working at a college here in Toronto, and I was sitting on the academic council. And at one point they asked me to do a presentation on online learning, because that's what my PhD was in, and I had actually done it at Seneca for the PhD. So I did the presentation, all went very well, and nice people got a nice little round of applause at the end. And then the chair of English stood up. Now, I was an English teacher. And he said, "Larry, lovely presentation, but it won't work." Well, I guess it will work. I guess it does work. And I guess the efforts that we've put in over the years are showing their value now. But I think too, that this is the point where they are going to be challenged, because we have laws on the books that are requiring us to accommodate our whole audience, not just the able-bodied. And we have to now bring our population up to speed, and our timing is extremely short. Can I open the floor to questions? Yes, Lisa.
Thank you so much. This was so helpful. I was scribbling notes and everything. I really was. And I know I remembered I can go back and watch it. But could you just succinctly bullet point those 5 points again? Because they kind of flowed one into another, and I know you have discrete points and they weren't discrete. The ones that I got, that I think I got, were to use the defaults in the LMS. You said set the heads, the level heads. You mean the level headings, right? As we would do in a document.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. Instead of putting in, I want 16 point, select level 2. Because that's what it'll give you. It'll give you 16 point, but it'll give it to you with that extra tag.
Yeah.
Or
Right,
the,
okay. And so was the second point colors?
No, first one was using the system defaults, which is referring to our LMSs and our computers, our
Okay.
Microsoft whatevers. Use the Word defaults. Most of us use Word.
Oh, use Word defaults. Okay.
And Word, Microsoft has been very proactive in making sure that their programs are compliant. Otherwise, they're going to lose the whole market.
Okay.
The third one addressed color.
Ah, okay. So I mixed them up. Okay.
And it's really just be careful.
Don't use red, don't use green, right?
Don't use red, don't use green. The fourth is tagging images or
tagging
descriptors.
images. Okay.
I mean, every course I put up will have a picture. So if it's spiritual formation, what have I got? I've got a picture of a statue in a cathedral somewhere. And if you put your cursor on top, behind it comes up with the statue of St. Michael in Durham Cathedral. In others where it's actually being used to convey meaning, those tags have to be a lot longer.
Sure.
And so
And
as we get into the details here, I do go into details on images that confer meaning versus that don't.
Okay. And number 5 was?
Captioning and MP3s.
Captioning and MP3s. Okay, thank you, because I heard all of that, but I didn't know how to break it down. So thank you.
I think that what we need to do is come out with a really simple approach for the faculty, or they're going to resist.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to put this into the Mickey Mouse kind of level that you can't tell me that you don't know what I'm talking about.
Right. Okay.
I've got faculty that collect fonts, and then they argue with me about, no, I don't like that font. I like this font. This is the font I want to use. And I say, well, you can use anything you want, just don't put it online.
Right.
If you're putting it online, this is what you're doing.
Yeah. One of the things I usually also try to convey is that a lot of times we can just get into some basic practices when we're putting together content. Because like I said, a lot of times, like I said, our LMSs and a lot of the things we use to create content have the areas to fill in the information for the readers and things like that.
Right.
And just by taking an extra minute and a half to go ahead and fill those out while you're actually creating your content can save you a whole lot of trouble than having them to go back later and try to fix it.
That's right. And this is what I mean. It's got to be a state of mind. That has to be a second nature thing. If I know that there's a facility that does all this, well, of course I'm going to use it.
Right. Yeah.
This feels it feels labor intensive, but listening to Roland, and after it just becomes standard practice, we'll get quicker at it, so it won't feel so labor intensive, correct?
That's right. The amount of time it takes you to change a font size in Word, you could have chosen a level of head in the same amount of time.
Right.
It's just instead of doing this thing with 6 keystrokes, I'm doing this with 1 mouse click.
Okay.
Yeah, because
Okay,
a lot of
I'm going to have to create it in Word. But what's also interesting, and it's just occurred to me, is that you're talking about Microsoft Word, and right, we're talking about LMS. So people who use Pages, we really need to go use Word. I mean, I happen to be a Word person, but if I had documents, I have some documents in Pages that will need to be converted.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not a problem. That's okay, I get that. But when you say use Word defaults, like whatever their default heading structures are and fonts. Okay.
Yeah. So instead of highlighting your text and using the font size, use the headings, because that way those codes are embedded. So when a reader picks it up, it'll know how to index your content.
So rather than, let me ask this question. So rather than attaching let's say a Word document into an LMS, would it be preferable to just put the content in the LMS structure and not the document?
It depends. It really depends on what that content is and how it's being presented. Most persons who are going to be using like content, like screen readers, they'll be able to, if you upload a document into your LMS, it'll let them know that there's a separate document that needs to be retrieved.
Right.
And then by creating a separate document, that also gives them ability to download it.
That's right.
And use it whenever. Whereas if you just paste it in the LMS, that means anytime they want to access that particular information, they have to be in the LMS.
Okay. So so my preference would be to make it as a document. But now you raise another question. No, I think I answered my question. Okay. So I think I have to figure out what my question, I think I have to figure out the answer to my question, because this thing with captioning and videos, that means that when we create PowerPoints with voiceovers,
Yep.
those have to be captioned as well?
In a perfect world, yes. By the letter of the law, if you have done voice over a PowerPoint, then you have the integrated PowerPoint with voice. You post a second version of the PowerPoint separately, and that counts as a transcript.
Oh, so then I would send
It
out.
says that the law is there must be alternative versions of everything.
Got it.
And it keeps boiling down to text is king.
Yeah.
So if I've got someone giving a lecture, I'm going to feed it through Dragon or something and see if I can pull a transcript out. If I've got a PowerPoint, and this was an issue that came up as I've been developing courses, the transcript is required, but the PowerPoint itself is considered equivalent to the transcript.
Yeah.
Ah.
And a lot of times, depending, for people who are more power users in PowerPoint, they'll put their stuff in notes in the notes area. So when you put up that PowerPoint, a lot of times people will go look and see if there are notes attached to a particular.
Now that's a good point. So then can the notes substitute for captioning?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Okay.
But it has to be, but you have to provide the PowerPoint as a PowerPoint separately than in the video. So attach the video that may have the narration with it, but then also have a copy of the actual PowerPoint as well. So they can actually pull it up in PowerPoint and look at the, the text reader can read the text that's on the slides and read any notes.
Roland, we had that VoiceThread webinar earlier this week. Roland, Lisa, and I are all on this at the same school.
Great.
Lisa and I are faculty members, just so you know, so we're in that group that you were talking about. Anyway,
Sorry, I apologize.
if we bought into that captioning service that is attached to VoiceThread, would it automatically caption then if somebody was narrating their PowerPoints within the VoiceThread?
Yes, like I said, and I've already put an inquiry in. I should have some more information on the captioning features that are available through VoiceThread.
Awesome.
Most captioning services, what they're basically going to do is they're using some type of automated, mechanics that'll go through and listen and transcribe, using machinery, the text, the text in the videos.
Right.
Then usually you
still need to go back in and
usually have to go in and still clean it up.
Yeah.
But that's true of them. Yeah, that's true of any captioning service.
Mhm.
But like I said, I should get some more information on the one through VoiceThread very shortly. I've submitted it to them yesterday, so I'm just waiting for Sadie to send me some responses, some pricing, so we can see about getting it on our campus.
Great. The other question that I had is, I haven't heard you say anything about PDF as a file type, and
Yes.
At least for a while, that was our default for what we were supposed to be uploading within Moodle.
Yeah.
It's really
So
simple.
yes, fine if it's in PDF
Devices
format.
that read Word be able to read the PDF files just as well, or?
It depends upon how you save the PDF.
Right.
Okay, if you're in Word and you save as PDF,
You're good.
no, it can't. If you're in Word and you
Okay,
export,
we got conflicting answers there.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
okay, if you export to PDF, then the screen that will pop up will give you a box to click that says include disability features.
Oh.
And then you've got all those captions built into it. So one way says no, and one way says absolutely.
So export to PDF in
Export
Word.
to PDF and select the disability options.
Okay, great.
They all look exactly this. I saw this presentation at Access a couple of years ago, and an instructional designer from Biola, she held up two documents and said, one is compliant and one is not. And you look at the documents and they're identical. You know, what you and I see is transparent, but what that assist device sees isn't.
Right.
That's a good question about the PDFs. I was actually thinking something else, but let me ask the question. So does the difference between save and export also impact whether it's OCR'd or not?
No. Now
Okay.
OCR, but usually OCRs, you're gonna have to run it through OCR if it's like a scan. Like if you take like an article, if you're pulling something from, usually if you're pulling something from a library or whatever, it's going to be a scan. You're going to have to run it through the OCR
Okay.
first, because when it does a scan, it keeps it as an image.
Right.
So even like Larry was saying, even though we can see the words,
Right.
we can see the characters and we can interpret the characters. A reader won't. It'll just see it as an image.
Right. No, that's happened. Okay, right. No, that's happened to me because, and I asked that because I annotate documents, and when it's an image, I can't do anything with it, so I know it's not OCR'd. Okay,
Yes.
but in Word, it'll either option will be OCR'd. The difference is whether it has the disability options.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
And this will all be, I mean, this thing I'm doing with the PowerPoint, I'm writing a chapter for a book that Fold is putting out in June.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically going to be, what do faculty have to know, and spelling it out in the detail.
Yeah.
But it will come down to 5 points at the end.
So, gentlemen, Rowland, I don't know if there's a difference between Canada and the U.S. So January 1st, everyone on the North American content will be responsible for having.
No.
Well, Canada,
This is where the difference in the laws are.
right.
In Canada and in Ontario in particular, they changed the disability law.
Okay.
Originally, it said that if you were publicly funded, you had to be compliant by January 1st, 2021.
Mm-hmm.
They changed it to being, if you have more than 50 employees, you must be compliant. Now, down in the States, the issue of public funding is still playing a very major role in this. And a lot of the Christian institutions, non-publicly funded, appear to be watching this legislation, realize it's coming, but it's not being forced upon them yet.
Right. So right now, right now,
I kind of look at it with the time pressure, whereas I recognize that my colleagues in the States, the time pressure isn't the same.
yeah,
But wisdom would say we should be proactive and get ahead of the curve.
Right.
we should get, because somewhere down the road it's probably going to come to us as well. Right now, we have to,
See, I also
right now.
figure if I have to go through this by 2021 and come up with all of the answers, sounds like I've got a good paper.
Yeah, definitely.
Got it.
But yeah, like right now, we're not obligated to do it until someone actually files an ADA claim.
Yeah.
However, because we have a lot of because we also have a lot of students who English is a second language. A lot of times using those same disability features
Works
helps them because like I said, they need to be able to a lot of times read it rather than sometimes if they're hearing it, it's going by too quick.
Yeah.
So for our, like in our standpoint, it would be more likely for us to do it because we have more students whose English isn't their first language,
Right.
more so than someone who's filing a disability, needs disability claim, and then we have to do it for their courses.
Right.
So, but the fact is, we should just be getting into the practice, or at least being understanding that it's out there. So, because if we just wait until somebody files a claim, then when that claim comes, no one knows what to do. So being up on
Okay.
what it takes to be compliant is important.
Okay.
And making sure we have the tools in place
Got
will
it.
be important as well.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Mhm. So one other thing I just wanted to also say about it can be a little bit more labor intensive at the front end, but the reality is a lot of the content that you're gonna be creating can be reused. Even if you're not reusing an entire course, you're just gonna reuse different content modules. So a lot of times, certain content modules that you may create, you may use for years. So having it done correctly at the front end will just saves a lot of work, and so you don't have to go back later and take something you've already done and redo it.
Yeah.
To meet a compliance.
Okay. Well, I'll be very busy this summer.
We all will.
Yeah.
Very busy. But it's a good thing.
Yeah. And like I said, feel free. Like I said, if you have any questions or we can, you can always give me an email. Like I said, and I don't know if everybody has Adobe licenses, but I know I have one in my office, and there's a few floating around campus. So if you need something, if you need to make sure that something is saved correctly, we can make sure of that. We can make sure of that as well.
Okay, Roland, is that I will send you an email about that offline.
Yeah, because not everybody has Acrobat Pro.
Right.
So if you don't have Acrobat Pro, then you may, if you want to make sure that something is set up correctly, you can just run it through and click all the right options, and then resave it.
When we're getting articles off of like EBSCO to use in our courses, are those already compliant?
Some are, some aren't. It really depends on the journal, because sometimes they're going to be scans, and if they're scans, we need to run them through OCR, optical character recognition. So a screen reader can actually read each of the characters as characters rather than as an image. But you also get some articles that are already correctly set up. So it's kind of like roulette. You kind of sometimes you get a winner, sometimes you don't.
Okay, great.
That's a good question. That's a good question, Kathy. Roland, to Kathy's question, to push that a bit further, will the compliance be on? Is the compliance by journal or by platform? For example, my experience, I have never gotten an article from JSTOR that's not OCR. EBSCO,
Right.
sometimes yes.
Right.
No. Right. So would it be by journal or by platform?
Well, like I said, probably like I said, more likely more platform-wise, because I'm pretty sure that JSTOR runs everything that's coming through their databases.
The same. Okay.
I think they actually do that. Whereas EBSCO, first of all, EBSCO's got like 1 million different databases. So
that makes sense.
So they're probably not gonna make sure that everything that's posted somewhere has been OCR.
Sure.
However, I think most of the time nowadays, if you're getting it from a database, especially a proprietary database that's being paid for, a lot of times now that the content will be OCR. Usually all the time I usually come across content from a library that's not OCR is if it's coming from the actual library and they're pulling it from the hard article, that they're pulling it from the stacks and scanning it. And sometimes they don't run it through. Like I said, I don't really know how our library does, because it's a little smaller, they may do it. But I know that, for the longest time when I was at Woodruff, I get stuff from Woodruff from reserves that they've created.
Mm-hmm.
They usually, because they're dealing with for schools, a lot of times they just scan it and stick it up. They don't go through any
Got it.
additional measures. But I would usually do it for our school.
Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Mhm. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I think Sebastian stepped away, so I just went, oh, no, there he is.
Oh, you guys were having such a great time. So
Yeah.
I just kept my camera off. But Lisa, thank you so very much for the questions you posed in the chat room, and hopefully my responses were also helpful.
No, they were helpful. Thank you.
But in Rollin, you've got an incredible resource. So I would say he's the man. And I want to thank Larry as well for being present and giving his presentation. And Larry, next time you come back, though, just tell us how you really feel. Don't hold back, you know. Would somebody like to close us in prayer?
I don't know, maybe.
Anyone?
I guess all the theologians are somewhere else. All the preachers are somewhere else today.
Dear Father, please remind us that we are always in your presence. We thank you so very much for this meeting that we've had together, this time that has been made available to us to grow and perfect our craft, which is that of teaching, which we do entirely for the benefit of our fellow man and entirely in the humility of our relationship with you. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
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 Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Kathy.
Good to see you too, Lisa, even though we live across the street from each other.
Bye-bye. Bye, gentlemen.
Bye.
See everybody next week.